Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my read-through of the books in Uru, Ages Beyond Mist. I'm G, and I feel like we're very close to that shell. I don't know if it's shown up in my playthrough yet, but the shell that appears from activating the Great Zero. But either way, we have more books to read on this rooftop. There's so many books just here alone. But yeah, we've got 4 more to read here, and then we've got a couple other books elsewhere to read. So let's get started. Marriage. Much more than modern cultures, within Dani culture all citizens were expected to marry. In fact, it was even believed that marriage was an important part of a relationship with Yavo, as it taught and revealed the necessary requirements for such a relationship. Both marriage relationships and the relationship with Yavo were described by the same Dani word, Taigon. Literally translated, the word means to love with the mind, and implied a deep understanding, respect, and most importantly, unselfish love for one another. Obviously, the religious influence on most of Dani culture was very strong, and as a result, marriage was not something taken lightly. It was considered a lifetime commitment, and for a Dani who could live to be 300 years old, it obviously was not a decision that Dani felt should be rushed into, and it seems as though it rarely was. Some records point to rare arranged marriages, although for the most part it seems that the decision was up to individuals. Marriage was not permitted before the age of 25, and marriage between blood relatives was strictly forbidden. Though allowed, marriage between the classes was looked down upon. Marriage to other worlders was practically unheard of. I found certain writings from the 9000s going so far as to call the mixing of Dani blood with outside cultures a travesty, while others wrote such a child, who marries an outsider, was better off dead. The marriage ceremony itself was not a single-day event, but one that took over 5 days. Attendance to those sections of the ceremony to which one was invited was extremely important, and it was considered a disgrace to be invited and not attend. The event usually began with a small ceremony held on the evening before the first day of the marriage ceremony. The ceremony always took place at the home of the groom, or his parents, and was meant to confirm both the bride and groom's decision to be united to one another in front of their immediate family. The groom presented his bride-to-be with a gift representing the confirmation of his choice. The acceptance of the gift by the bride-to-be was acknowledgement of her decision. Immediately after her acceptance of the gift, the bride-to-be was escorted away with her family and not to be seen by her groom until the joining ceremony that would take place on the 5th day. The first day was meant for the bride and groom to spend time with their families. As they were starting their own family, their old family would no longer be the highest priority. Thus, the day was set aside to spend time with that original family. Traditionally, the day ended with a large meal as well as speeches and blessings from the parents of the child. The second day was set aside for the bride and groom to spend with friends, both married and unmarried. Traditionally, one of the friends would host a large dinner at the end of the day. The third day was reserved for spending time with the soon-to-be in-laws. It was on the day that the bride and groom received blessings from their in-laws as well as other members of their family. Again, there was a traditional larger meal at the end of the day marked by speeches from the eventual in-laws and other soon-to-be family members. The fourth day was meant for the couple to spend time alone with Yavo individually. Though many apparently viewed the day as formality, others viewed it as the most significant of all the days. The day was often filled with prayer asking for Yavo's blessings upon the event, as well as a time to understand Yavo's desires for their new lives together. It was also considered a time to purify themselves before Yavo. Some chose to spend time with the priests or prophets, while others read the holy books and talked to Yavo himself. The 5th day was the day of joining. The early portion of the day was set aside for physical preparation, while the later part of the day was set aside for the joining ceremony itself. For those who did not have access to private ages, the ceremony usually took place on marriage ages. For the upper classes, the ceremony took place in family ages. All family was expected to attend, as were fellow guild members. All of those in attendance were divided into 2 sides. One side represented the groom, while the other represented the bride. Between the 2 sides in the center were a long aisle and a triangular podium. The bride and groom would each approach their side of the podium by walking through their respective family and friends. It was, after all, those families and friends who had made the bride and groom what they are, and the Dani believed it was those family and friends who should present their bride or groom to the spouse. The priestess usually stood on the 3rd side of the podium. As with most important events, and especially marriage, the bride and groom wore the bracelets they had been given at birth as well as maturity. After the bride and groom arrived to the platform, the father of the bride would remove the bride's bracelets and give them to the groom. The Dani believed the giving of the bracelets represented the giving of the bride's purity and adulthood to the groom. A short speech often followed the event. The father of the groom would follow the father of the bride with the identical procedure, giving his son to the bride. The giving of the children was followed by an expression of both parents of their blessings upon those being joined, as well as all of those present. Symbolically, the bride and groom then switched sides to represent an acceptance of all the bride's family and friends of the groom, and vice versa. Both the bride and groom then handed all 4 bracelets to the priestess. While the priestess led the couple through their commitments to one another in Yavo, the bride and groom placed their hands upon the podium. During the commitments, the couple made promises to one another followed by promises to Yavo. All were recited aloud to the priestess. The priestess usually reminded the couple that marriage was a reminder of Tagon, to know with the mind, and that their love should always be a representation of their love for Yavo. Following the commitments, the priest would place 2 new and larger bracelets upon the bride and groom. The groom's was placed upon the left wrist, and the bride the right wrist. The new bracelets were meant to represent both the purity and maturity bracelets their spouse had previously worn. The Denis emphasized that the spouse was now your responsibility to keep pure and knowledgeable of good and evil. The bracelets were meant to be a constant reminder of that responsibility as well as commitment to maintain the best for the spouse. After the new bracelets were placed upon the wrists, the hands of the bride and groom were wrapped together with a tight cord covering the wrists and hands completely. Upon completion, the priest placed a ring upon the pinky of each free hand. The rings were symbolic reminders of the entire ceremony and placed upon the 5th finger to represent the joining that took place on the 5th day. The priestess would then usually remove herself from the podium so that the couple could take her place. Together, the couple then walked down the aisle between the 2 parties and toward the far end of the aisle where a glass of wine waited for them. Before drinking, the couple knelt and prayed together to Yavo. After the prayer, they each drank from the cup, and the 2 sides of the hall merged into one group, often with great celebration. They were now considered joined, and the celebration could begin. Families usually fed all in attendance, and there was typically dancing and music. The couple was expected to keep their hands united throughout the night as a reminder that they were now joined both in the eyes of man and Yavo. The binding of the hands was apparently meant to be somewhat troublesome, symbolizing that there would be difficult times to their relationship, but that those times did not affect the fact that they were now joined. Following the celebrations, tradition was for the couple to embrace and the priestess to touch a linking book to them so that they would both link to vacation or honeymoon type ages. Though these vacations were usually short, it was not unusual for the man to not work for up to a year in order to build the new marriage. I should also note that the cord used to join the couple's hands together was also viewed as a sacred item. It seems as though various couples used the cords in a variety of different ways, some using them for necklaces and others hanging them in their house. Maturity. Similar to a variety of other cultures, the Denis celebrated a child's entrance into reason and maturity. The Denis believed that true maturity, or the age of reason as they called it, was achieved at the age of 25. Before that, the Denis believed that children's minds and hearts were not properly formed. Up until that time, they even went so far as to say it was impossible for a child to truly make a correct decision, as they were too easily controlled by other motives. That did not mean that what they did was not right or wrong, but the Denis believed that Yavo did not hold them accountable for those decisions. Up to that point, it was apparently up to the parents to judge and protect, and thus another reason society encouraged couples to only have one child at a time under 25. In the ceremony of readiness, the Denis celebrated a child's entrance into reason and maturity. At the ceremony, the child was presented with a bracelet of knowledge, also translated maturity. I have to admit the translation is somewhat poor and makes it sound like a magical or superstitious item, something it did not sound like to them. In fact, it was a fairly serious item. The Denis viewed the bracelet as a sign of accountability. The individual, once given the bracelet, was expected to be responsible for his or her actions, as he or she had true knowledge of good and evil, and the wisdom to make the right choices between both. Associated with the bracelet were certain rights, as well as expectations to behave in a more correct manner. From a religious standpoint, the ceremony of readiness signaled accountability to Yavo as well as fellow Denis citizens. No longer were parents judged for the actions of their children on a religious level, and no longer was lack of knowledge an excuse to Yavo. The Maker, they believed, now expected much more from them. Though the age of reason was 25, the Denis did not consider true wisdom to come until much later. With not nearly the fanfare that the age of reason brought, at 125 years of age there was another celebration for reaching the age of wisdom. Perhaps most importantly, regarding that status, the Denis were allowed to become highest ranks of teachers or leaders, grandmasters or lords. The same rules applied to women, and no woman under the age of 125 was technically allowed to advise, especially the kings. As well, it appeared that a woman's fertility ended around age 125. During the time of the kings, advisors were required for those kings who were under the age of 125, as the king himself had not achieved the age of wisdom. The great king Alcindar was the only king who did not have an official advisor, even though he was under the age of wisdom for the majority of his reign. Pregnancy. Now this is surprising. I can't say for sure, but it seems fairly clear that Denis women were only fertile for 1 Denis day every 2 Denis months. In surface terms, that's roughly only 30 hours every 72 days. If true, it explains quite a few things. First, why there were so few children for a people who lived 300 years, and secondly, the reason behind the rather large celebrations of pregnancy. As far as I can tell, these celebrations were usually limited to family members, although they were rather large. There was quite a bit of prayer to Yavo as well as blessings from the family members. These blessings usually included vows to care for the pregnant woman and child through the coming months. As I have mentioned in other areas, pregnant women were believed to be much more insightful, and as a result, part of the pregnancy experience, although not part of the official ceremony, was using that insight to gain revelation from Yavo. Though there was quite a bit of religious meditation expected of women during this time, I won't go into it here. However, this meditation was expected to primarily guide the women to her child's future and its purpose, and was taken rather seriously. While pregnancy within marriage was cause for great celebration, the same cannot be said of pregnancy outside of marriage. As far as I can tell, any woman who became pregnant was expected to immediately marry, and any child conceived out of wedlock was unable to join a guild for its entire life. As well, no revelation was expected from such a mother. This was as equivalent a curse to a lower class woman as her child would not be able to attend a guild of the upper class. As far as I can see, gestation was a full year, 10 Denis months, 290 Denis days, equivalent to 1 Earth year. I have found no records of multiple births. Class structure. Seems as though my first inclination towards class structure was incorrect. Though early on there was little in the way of class society, such a high ideal faded quickly. By 9400 DE, there were 7 very distinct classes. Elite, the lords and the grandmasters of the major guilds. It was possible for private citizens to be accepted, but if so, abundant resources were needed. It was only the elite who owned private libraries of books and the private islands. Quite a few obvious attempts to reach out and unify the classes, although I'm not sure it did much good. Common libraries, major guild scholarships, renovation of poorer districts all seemed more political than life-changing. Not surprising, I suppose. Guild members. Yes, it was possible for the lower classes to attend, but it seems by the end, the schools were far too expensive and prestigious to allow for such. As a result, the graduates became a class among themselves, and a very high one at that. Upper class, the lowest of the 3 higher classes. Such citizens had succeeded in private enterprise, and most likely provide the elite with their banks, pubs, etc. No major guild education for the most part, but enough money to buy their way into the upper classes. Middle class, mostly shop owners and the like, able to afford some luxuries of Denis, but still considered far from the elite. Rare, but possible for them to own books as well as private ages. Seemed to make up most of the minor guild enrollment. High poor. The higher class of poor seemed to be made mostly of industrial workers, many of whom spent their time on foreign ages, before it was outlawed, of course. It seems that this class, along with the lower 2, did not own books. Low poor. I can't seem to find a better name for them. However, it seems clear that there were 2 classes of poor. These low poor were relegated to their own districts and rarely seen even with the middle class, and never with the upper classes. Probably used as servants, although that was generally looked down upon. Sub-low? Reference to the least, an undefined subclass, are found on rare occasions. Not enough data to elucidate. Draft copy 1.04 DRC. Welcome to the Great Zero. You'll notice a number of different areas to the Great Zero structure, as well as a number of various machines. We apologize for the great detail, but the structure and related mechanisms and systems are somewhat complicated. Antechamber. You are currently standing in the Great Zero antechamber. Though you can see the Great Zero machinery through the small window, access to the Great Zero courtyard is not available directly from the antechamber. In order to access the plaza, you will need to upload 5 Great Zero markers, GZMs, into the Great Zero system and link into the plaza via your nexus. Great Zero marker, GZM uploads. Great Zero markers found in numerous locations throughout the cavern are fairly easy to find, and by following a few easy steps, simple to upload into the system. 1. Once you have a key version 2.0 or higher, which you have if you've linked here by the way of the nexus, you still need to upgrade your key to retrieve marker coordinates. That can be done easily by placing your key into the upload machine in this room. The first time a key is inserted, the system will enable your key to retrieve markers. If you see 5 faint colored lights on your key, then you have properly enabled your key to retrieve markers. 2. Find GZMs. They are located throughout the cavern in a variety of locations. Please note that markers can be in a large variety of places, not just the more common paths. However, be aware that these markers will not be visible unless they sense an upgraded key within 25 feet. 3. Before the point they are visible to the naked eye, as long as there is an unobstructed view, the small light on your key will also begin to flash as an indicator. Once you see the GZM, you will need to touch it. You will know the GZM has been registered if one of the faint lights turns solid. 4. Once you have found 5 GZMs and have 5 solid lights on your key, you will need to return here to the antechamber and upload your GZMs into the system. You can use the same machine you used to initiate your key to do that. Great Zero Courtyard. 1. Once you have uploaded 5 GZMs, you will find a new link in your Nexus. That link will take you to the Great Zero Courtyard, the central location of the Great Zero Neutrino Dispenser. 2. You will see another upload machine inside the courtyard, as well as a couple of doors towards the back of the room. Great Zero Calibration Center Access. 1. The Calibration Center located beyond the courtyard cannot be accessed unless a key has registered more GZMs, more than the 5 that are needed to access the courtyard. Registering is done the same way as listed above. You'll have a new set of faint lights. As GZMs are found, they will turn solid again. 2. Once the second set of GZMs has been uploaded, in either the courtyard or the antechamber, the doors leading to the Calibration Center will automatically open for you from that point forward. Great Zero Calibration Center. 1. Most important to the Calibration Center are the 4 Great Zero Maintenance Units, GZMU, towards the back, as well as the Calibration Imager, CI. 2. Once you have uploaded 20 GZ markers in upload machines, in either the antechamber or courtyard, you will be allowed access to the machines and the ability to find a new type of marker known as a Calibration Great Zero marker, CGZM. Good gracious. Calibration Great Zero markers, CGZMs. 1. Once you have reached the Great Zero Calibration Center, your key only needs to finish the calibration process by synchronizing calibrations with the Great Zero itself. 2. There are 4 machines that enable you to carry out the final task. 3. You will need to receive a coordinate from one of the 3 machines, the 4th is not yet available, and find the single marker at that coordinate. Similar to the early markers, it will only become visible when you have entered a certain radius, and you will have to touch it. After you have found the first one, you will need to return to the Calibration Center and insert your key into one of the machines. At that time, you'll be able to read one of the 3 coordinates on your key. 4. After the second, you will be able to read 2. 5. After the third, you will be able to read 3. 6. At that point, the 4th will become available. 7. After you have found the 4th marker, your key will be calibrated. 8. If the Great Zero has not been turned on, it will also be turned on. Is that true, Laxman? We obviously haven't tested this. 9. And you're finished. Congratulations. We at the DRC hope that this document has provided you a better understanding of the key and Great Zero functionality. We also hope you realize how vital your success is to help calibrate our Great Zero. We appreciate your support greatly. Is this too mushy? Might be a little over the top. Again, thank you for visiting the Great Zero, and we appreciate your patience and support. The Story of Me'erta, taken from Book 28b. Translation: Nick. First draft. In the time of Me'erta, in the 196th year of his reign, Jolatha, his mother, came to him in his bedroom. Now it was well known throughout the city of Me'erta and his craving, lust for women, and none knew this weakness, a weakness of choice is more literal, more than his own mother. So it was that Jolatha brought with her the woman Ramel, who worshipped the tree. Ramel's beauty was well known in Denis, especially among those who worshipped the tree, and especially among the kings. Plural kings is here, although I don't know why. Maybe implied the whole king's palace or history? Not sure. But as it was, though the king could have any object in Denis, Ramel had been held from him by his mother, until now, and she offered her son Ramel in exchange for her own purposes. But what are your purposes? The king asked. For do you think me so foolish as to give you anything you want for a mere woman? Of course not, my son. But as you know, you have watched Ramel from afar for many years. You have talked to your advisors and plotted the ways in which you could make her yours. But you have been unable even to look upon her so closely until this day that I have brought her to you. So do not think that I am so foolish so as to believe that this woman is a mere woman. You have spoken truthfully. In fact, as I gaze upon her now, I have never imagined her to be so beautiful. She is like a statue without flaw. But even so, do you think I would give you whatever you wish for even a woman such as this? Now Jolatha was cunning, and Me'erta was eager for Ramel. And every day Jolatha brought the woman into the king's bedroom, and every day she offered her son the woman Ramel in exchange for her own purposes. But as the nights passed, Me'erta became unsatisfied with those who were already his. He became spiteful of those who came to his bedroom, for none compared to the woman Ramel, whom his mother continued to withhold from him. And finally he could resist his mother's arguments no longer. And Jolatha came to his bedroom with the woman Ramel, and King Me'erta began to speak. The woman has ruined my life. There is none like her in all my ages, and you bring her to this room night after night. Those who I have found beautiful have folded in comparison to this one, and I no longer find pleasure in them. Therefore, I am no longer satisfied with anything, and I will not be satisfied until this woman is mine. What is it that you ask of me? Whatever it is, I will give. You have my word. Very well, my son. I will talk to you tomorrow. And Jolatha gave the woman Ramel of the worshippers of the tree to her son, and Ramel was King Me'erta's from that day forward. At dawn of the next day, Jolotha came to Maerta while he was still sleeping, and told him her purposes. The Guild of Riders had long had their rules, their restrictions, and their ancient oaths, but you realize, my son, that these words are old now, and no longer the ways of our people. Rainaref was responsible for them, and they are like a collar around our necks, growing ever tighter and preventing us from moving forward. It is time that we are freed. Even Maerta was disturbed. But there are none who would agree to this. The oath is as stone. It cannot be altered, for it has never been. And yet, not only do you ask me to change the oath, but contradict the things it says? And Jolotha grew angry. Are you so foolish? Do you think that I ask you to carry out the impossible? There is but one thing that must be changed, one thing that will give us freedom. It is the Dani who have created the art as we know it, not Yavo. Thus, since it is true, it is us who can determine the rules of the art, not the ancient religious writings. They will view it as blasphemy, the king responded, but I will do as you say. And so King Maerta spoke to the Guild of Riders. His words were well crafted, often from his mother, and his arguments strong, for they too Jolotha gave him. And his effort was great, for there was no other woman besides Ramel, and it was the woman that he lived for. However, though many in the Guild of Riders were easily convinced by the sharp words of the king, there was one who was not. Grand Master Tremal was old in age and wise beyond even his years, and his decision was hard. The word is a certain kind of stone that was considered to be the most hard and immovable, and he would not be moved. Never will we change what Ailish has written in the oaths. Never will we change what we have spoken for generations. Never will we allow a crack to be opened in the great wall of our guild. For it is tyranny that you seek. But is tyranny not the reason we exist? For Tremal could see the plans of Jolotha even in the words of the king. And Tremal knew that if the ancient religious writings did not determine their fate, the hearts of men would rule, and there would be nothing to stop Jolotha from having her way. And so for 3 days Tremal stood to the words of the king. For 3 days the king would return to his palace and receive new words from his mother. For 3 days the anger of Jolotha burned against Tremal and grew stronger. And so it was that on the 4th day, when the king was no longer welcome to the guild, Grand Master Tremal was found hanging from a tree, his body covered in blood. The king was sad when he heard the news, for he held no bitterness in his heart toward Tremal. But when Jolotha heard the news, she was overjoyed, and ordered the king to the Guild of Riders to change the oath and carry out her own purposes. But as it was, the death of Tremal had breathed boldness into the guild, and in unison they denounced the wicked evil that had killed their Grand Master, and vowed that the oaths of their guild would never be changed, and that there would be no more discussions. So Jolotha devised other plans, for she knew that even she could not change such determined, the same word as used above, the hardened stone, guildsman. And King Maerta lived with Ramel, and he was satisfied with all those who visited his room again. Even as he was filled with pleasure, Jolotha plotted evil, and the city in which he lived grew weak. Probably ready for a Dr. Watson review. The Story of Kedri, taken from Book 42b. Translation, Nick. First draft. Kedri loved his people, and the people of Dani loved their king. For Kedri did well in the eyes of Yavo, and sought to serve those whom he led. In the 48th year of his reign, Kedri roamed the streets of Agura, and was greatly disturbed, for even though all people, rich and poor, loved their king, Kedri saw that the entire island of Agura was filled with those who were prosperous, and those who governed Dani. "Where are my people?" Kedri asked those who walked with him. "All around you," they answered, pointing to the crowds that followed them. "Yet I do not see my people here. I see masters of the guild, and I see owners of our stores. But I do not see those who have no option to join our guild, or those who have built the stores. Where are my people on this island?" So the king called together his counselors and expressed his disappointments, and he ordered that a new place isn't right, but I'm having trouble with this word, not the usual district word either, although that might be a better translation, or home, be built on the island, and that the name of the place be Shamathan. He ordered that Shamathan be made available, not to those who did possess the wealth and stature of the elite, but to those who were not so fortunate. Still, they were his people, and the area was built, and Kedri was joyful to see his people live in such a place. Same word again. A short while later, after the area of Shamathan began to grow, Kedri was walking through the city, conversing with his people and telling them of his plans, and Kedri was led to the common library because he wanted to see the ages that he had heard his people talk of. And again, the king was disturbed, and he asked his advisors, "Where are the books that the great Dani have written?" "All around you," they answered, pointing to the rows of books that lined the shelves. "Yet I do not see the ages of our people here. I see ages that resemble failed school assignments for the students of writers. I see ages that not even those students would visit, much less a king. So I will ask again, where are the great ages of Dani?" So the king returned to his palace and ordered his counselors to bring his most prized book, The Age of the Kings, written during the reign of his grandfather, to the common library, so that the people of Denis might be able to see the skills of the great writers, even as he had seen them. And the people loved their king more than they had before. So the king called his advisors and ordered them to add to the great temple, so that Yavo might be pleased, and so all of Denis could visit their god. Really, it's a form of Yavo again. I thought God made more sense, though, in his house, just as those with money, an inherited kind of money, were allowed to do. The king ordered them to add to the opera house so that all of Denis could hear the skills of song of the people, just as those with money, an earned kind of money, were allowed to do. The king ordered them to add to the district of Bellari, so that the area started by King Ricari may not fall into disrepair, but be treated as all other areas of the city, and that all of Denis might live in prosperity, just as those with money, both earned and inherited, were allowed to do. And all people of Denis grew to love their king more than they had before. Some trouble spots here. Seems there were a few different kinds of money words. Might need help with those as well as the whole place thing. The Story of Me'emen, taken from Book 21D. Translation, Nick. First draft. And a dark sickness spread through the city, and sores broke out on the skin of those the sickness touched. Might be better translated infected, but touched fits with the literary style. And some began to die. The sickness came from Yasafeh, where the large trees grew, and where the wood of Yamen was harvested. As it was, there was great fear in the houses of all those who lived with Yamen close to them, and so great fear spread through the king's household, and through all those who worked in the halls of the guilds, and those who looked over the city. Such fear overcame the minds of reason, and many began to flee the city and run to the other places that were available to them. But King Me'emen was angry at those who ran, and was himself unafraid, literally not of fear. And so he called for the healer, Grandmaster Shemef, to come to his room, and though Shemef was preparing to flee, he obeyed his king, and came to him quickly. Grandmaster Shemef, the king asked his healer, have you not read the histories of our people? Have you not been instructed in the ways of those who led your guild in the generations before you? Are you not aware of the plague that this place has already seen? My king, it is for those reasons I am prepared to flee, for I know those who died, and those who were unable to prevent it. From taking hold of them, I know of this plague in detail. And the king answered, Depart, I have no time for you, Shemef. Depart to your own age and do not return to this place again. May it be that my eyes never look upon your face again. And Shemef departed from King Me'emen, and he never saw him again. And King Me'emen called for Guildmaster Anim of the Guild of Healers. And though Anim was preparing to flee, he obeyed his king and came to him quickly. Guildmaster Anim, the king asked his healer, have you too not read the histories of our people? Have you not heard the ways of those who led your guild 3,000 years ago? My king, of course. It is for those reasons that I know what may happen to our people. It is for that reason that we must protect ourselves first, so that we may protect those who trust us for protection. It is not how I would have thought. Depart with your master, and may I never see you again, King Me'emen ordered. And King Me'emen called for Guildmaster Raman of the Guild of Healers. And though Raman was preparing to flee, he obeyed his king and came to him quickly. Guildmaster Raman, the king asked his healer, tell me that you have read the histories of our people and been instructed in the ways of your guild. Tell me you have heard of the destruction of the sickness that overcame our people 3,000 years ago. Of course, my king. It is for these reasons that we must bring the ancient books to another age so that we may study our records and learn in the ways that we must fight, but to stay here would be suicide. It is as I would have thought. Depart with your master, and may you never see the light of the lake again, King Me'emen ordered. And King Me'emen was greatly disturbed and troubled, and he stayed in his room for 4 nights. His servants brought food for him, but he refused to eat, and his servants brought advisors, but he refused to speak. And all of those around him became worried, even as more of the city became empty. And finally, King Me'emen called for Guild Captain Irem of the Guild of Healers. And Irem was studying in the guild, and he obeyed his king and came to him quickly. Guild Captain Irem, the king asked his healer, tell me that you have read the histories of our people and been instructed in the ways of your guild. Tell me that not all of Denis is running in fear of a sickness that can be defeated. Of course, my king. It is for these reasons that I have not left my class since I first heard of the sickness appearing in the district where the trees appear. I understand that our father, the honored Guildmaster Jason, worked for 6 years even after the Book of Birneni was found. He worked day and night, and stood by our people as he sought to save them from the sickness that had even infected our king. It is for those reasons that I will not leave this place until the sickness is no longer in our city. Tell me whatever you need, and it will be yours. You are most honored in this palace today, and Denis will be saved because of you. And King Me'emen was filled with joy, and he ate from the food his servants brought him, and spoke with the advisors who came to speak. As it was, Irem spent day and night without sleeping for 4 more days, And on the 5th day, the cure was found, and the sickness was deadly no longer. And King Me'emen gave the guild of healers to Irem, and he was known as Grand Master from that day forward. Shemef, Anem, and Raman were restricted from the guild of healers and never again allowed inside of it, or of the palace, or of any of the king's dwellings and structures. And King Me'emen ordered the surveying of a new section of the city to be called Ner Eril. And this section was to be away from the city, so that any sickness brought from the other worlds would not be brought to the heart of the city, but instead away from it, so that fear would not spread again. And he ordered that the story of Grandmaster Irem would be taught to all of those who were instructed by the Guild of Healers from that day forward, so that none would forget the power of Denis and the great strength of their medicines and learning. Seems a good place to stop. I filled in a few words that I weren't sure about, but overall, feel pretty good about this one. And I think that this is a pretty good place to cut it. We have learned a little bit more about how Denis actually ran. We learned a little bit about the Great Zero, and we learned the stories of 3 more kings. Now, that was sort of 3 different chunks, but we're getting into the point where we're starting to get into books that are just sort of out on their own, like the Great Zero Notebook. But, next up, we have so many kings to read about. Even though we've read about a bunch of kings, we've got a whole bunch of kings in that palace courtyard just outside the library here. And I'm really excited to see what those hold, and I hope you are too. So thank you all so much for following my read-through of the books in Uru Ages Beyond Mist, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye now.